This is Sarah Stewart Holland.
And this is Beth Silvers.
Thank you for joining us for Pantsuit Politics. Hello, and welcome to Pantsuit Politics, where we take a different approach to the news. Today is my birthday. Happy birthday to me. And we have a very special episode for you today. As most of you know, my youngest son, Felix, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last year. And I have learned so much during this past year about myself and about parenting and about politics and about our healthcare system, all through the lens of diabetes. So I wanted to invite some of my favorite people in the diabetic community on to talk about that. First up, you are going to hear from diabetes educator Neil Greathouse, known as the Beaties on social media. Next, you're going to hear from Stacey Simms, author of The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. She is, in fact, not the world's worst diabetes mom. We get to that. And also the host of the podcast Diabetes Connection. And then you're going to hear from my son, Felix, who spoke with me about his time at diabetes camp. Now, this is not just an episode for people with diabetes. In fact, the entire inspiration for this episode is how much diabetes can illuminate, even if you have no idea what a CGM or an A1C or a PDM even is. So I hope that you will join us for the conversation afterwards and that you enjoy this episode. It is one very close to my heart. Neil Greathouse, welcome to Pantsuit Politics.
Probably one of the greatest days of my life.
Oh, stop. Well, I was going to introduce you.
I'm not even joking.
But this is silly. Why don't you just introduce yourself? You're here. You can introduce yourself.
I'm here. I'm an adult. I can do this. My name's Neil. I'm a director. I'm a filmmaker. I also am a diabetes educator, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 31 years. Make some educational videos every single day on social media.
Under the account The Beaties. That's how I found you. My husband loves your account.
The Beaties, yes. No collaboration crossover with Beats by Dre. It's a missed opportunity. It's a swing and a miss, and I realize that now.
I invited you on Pantsuit Politics on this very special diabetes-themed episode because this is often the case that I have found as a parent of a type 1 diabetic. Diabetes is just a window to so much insight. Like, often I'll be talking about just something like spiritual, and I'll be like, you know what? Diabetes is an excellent metaphor for this. Let me tell you about basal insulin and bolus insulin
Yes.
and how we have to maintain our foundations before we can take on big challenges.
Yep.
And you did a series really about the cost of insulin that I want to talk about, but it was excellent insight into the healthcare industry overall. Like, it just was a great window into how these industries function. So tell us how you started making this series and what you learned in this particular social media series about the price of insulin.
I spent about 3.5 months just researching before I posted any of it because so many people think that the insulin pricing problem is all connected to the manufacturers. And at some point, I just wanted to go, okay, is that true? Because if it is, I'm going to make some phone calls, or maybe I can drive over there and talk to somebody. Like, that's genuinely
myself to something.
Yeah, for real. Like, and they don't need any more of that. And that's when I started realizing, after talking to about the 5th or 6th advocate that has gone to Washington, after watching a lot of these congressional hearings, these Senate subcommittees, you realize, okay, this thing is so much more convoluted and corrupt than I thought it was. And that's what this unfolded into. So it turned into about 23 pages of notes. But after all of that was done, I realized I cannot expect anybody to sit here and listen to all this. So I broke it down into 60-second, 90-second. Here's what the pharmacies are doing. Here's what the manufacturers are doing. Here's what the PBMs are doing. And that is where it really started to get clear, is that this is it's a winding road, but everybody is dipping into that pot.
So PBM is Pharmacy Benefit Manager, right?
Pharmacy Benefit Managers.
Did you know anything about those before you started this process?
No, I'd heard of PBM, but didn't know what that meant and didn't know what they did, had no idea. I thought you go get a prescription for insulin and it comes from the manufacturer, and it doesn't. It has to go through a PBM. It has to go through a wholesaler. It has to go through a holding facility at some point. And you have pharmacies are taking their cut. The insurance companies are taking their cut. And then PBMs are after the manufacturers. So they sit in between the insurance companies and the manufacturers. You go, well, why do you need all of that? Well, if you want to get your insulin or your prescription of any kind to be on a formulary, which means it's available through your healthcare provider, then you have to go through a PBM. They are the gatekeepers. And so what you do is you have to pay them off.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of them, if they don't get a kickback, if they don't get a cut or a percentage of that, they will take your drug off of their formulary, meaning you can't go there and get it, and you're out of the game. So that's the key. You have to be on the formulary.
I remember reading a piece, probably, I think it was before COVID, about monopolies. In this piece, they were explaining PBMs. You did a better job. I fully comprehend it now. It was the whiteboard. I don't know the visuals, but and remember thinking, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And I think, you're talking about them right now as if they're separate from the pharmacy and the insurance company, but I learned through your video that they are not.
They're not.
So why is that relevant to, I don't know, monopolies?
Right. This is interesting because it's an oligopoly. These three main insulin manufacturers they account for 96% of the world's insulin, which that kind of blows your mind. You're like, for real? In order to go to the pharmacy, you think, all right, I've got to go through this. The PBMs own or are owned by the healthcare providers, and they also own the pharmacies. So CVS is the PBM. They are the pharmacy, and they also are owned by a healthcare provider.
Well, Anthem, because when you said that on your piece, I was like, oh, no wonder everything has gone so smoothly for us. We have Anthem insurance and we go to CVS.
Yeah, because it's all connected. And if you do that, you're like, okay, this is great. But there are so many kickbacks. There are so many add-ons. Well, hey, we'll give you this coupon for this, or we'll give you this discount for this. Who's getting any of that money? It's all going back to the same company. So they're all owned by the exact same company, and they're not regulated. They are behind a black curtain. The United States government does not know, and they cannot do investigations on the exchange of money and the contract deals that are going on. It is not regulated. There are lobbyists that spend $20 billion a year to make sure that it stays this way inside of our healthcare system and inside of our government.
You see the manufacturers raising the price of insulin, but you also hear them saying, we're making less money. Both of those are true because that money is going to the PBM.
Right. Yeah. They're raising the price, making less money because the PBM takes their cut. So here's how this will prove to you that the PBMs are the problem in all of this. The manufacturers make money if they sold the same vial of insulin for $35. And here's why. Because you could go to Mexico and Canada and buy the exact same drug that costs me, if I go to Kroger or Walmart right now, costs $380 for one vial. If I go to Canada or Mexico right now, it's $35, and the manufacturer is still profiting at that price. So everything else in between there is a markup. It's insane.
That was my first question when you said they manufacture like 96% of the world's insulin. So what does this look like in Britain or Canada?
They also don't have the same healthcare coverage that we do.
Obviously.
So the healthcare system is not inside. So like you go to Australia and they get this medicine nearly for free. Same thing with some insulin pumps. Now it takes them longer to get insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitors, and things like that through a durable medical equipment. It takes them longer to get it available, but once it is nearly free for the public.
Well, and that's what I thought when you said that, because you get to a later part in the series where you talk about Medicaid Part D, which it's not equivalent, but it's important because, I mean, when you're talking about Canada or the UK or Australia, there's one main buyer, it's the government. And our government is a buyer, and it's a huge buyer. And so changes to that matter. So is there any movement within that? Or I know you watched a lot of congressional hearings to get this PBM situation under control?
So not necessarily. So when they said, and they made this law as of last year, that the United States government can now negotiate on behalf of Medicaid, so that then They never had that purchasing power before. Now that they do, the average is 4 years.
Well, they did. They just didn't want to exercise it.
There it is.
Legally.
There it is. Yeah, they always had the ability to do that. Now
Right.
they're exercising that. And so it usually takes 4 years before the general public see those discounts. So if they're the largest purchasing agent that is out there, their ability to negotiate with those manufacturers is going to drive that price down. It has to.
Right. Well, then we saw those changes, and then you see the manufacturers coming and dropping the prices. Now, you made this series before they dropped.
Oh, it was right in the middle of it. So they dropped
Okay.
it as I finished the next to last video.
Oh, my
I was
gosh.
like, are you watching this? I know they're not. They're definitely not.
They might be. You don't know.
So what's interesting is a lot of people, I don't know if you saw it when they could make all those new accounts. I don't know if you saw it, but Eli Lilly had somebody make a fake account.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
posted that insulin now is free. And it looked like a verified Twitter account. And the internet did what the internet does, and it went off. And I absolutely loved it. So yes, there was now all of a sudden pressure. But here's what's happened is all these main 3 manufacturers have said, hey, we now have insulin that we're going to cap at $35 copay. So they're still going to make their money. That's only a copay. That's not what someone's actually paying for it. But what they're actually doing is they're offering that on a generic version of their drug, not a biosimilar. So they're not giving you the insulin that you could use in an insulin pump because your insulin pump won't take a generic insulin because a generic really has to be, it's in the 60s. It's 60% effective of what the original is. So they're making this generic version available. It's all optics. They're saying, well, now, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to take one for the team. And we're going to give it to you guys at this discount. Are you really though? No, they're doing it on a generic that they don't have to have the patent on there while holding on to the patents that they have over here. And then what's even crazy is to continue to further the patent on the actual insulin that they have. They've changed the delivery method, which is why insulin pens have come out. So it's not a vial and a syringe now. They get another 20 to 40 years on that patent just by changing it to be available in an insulin pen. Drug hasn't changed at all.
Well, that was another part that I thought was so interesting and wildly relevant outside the diabetes community is the practice of evergreening, which is sort of what you're describing. Tell us what that means.
So this is the last process where manufacturers, they try and keep their old patents. And what they do is they extend the lifespan of those patents by basically producing or changing or modifying it by such a small percentage that it's not really changing it at all. It's not done to improve health. It's not done to improve the drug. It's done to make sure that the patent they hold on their drug is good for 20, 40, 60 years to keep that monopoly pricing period going. The demand is fixed. Supply is unlimited. They can make as much of this as they want. But the average cost to make a vial of insulin right now in 2023 is around $7. It's a 3,006% markup on insulin. It's the 3rd most expensive liquid on planet Earth right now. Just crazy.
Crazy. And I think it just speaks to sort of the industry practices and the industry priorities. You talk about a nonprofit company that's entered the field, and I think that gets to it. I mean, their job isn't to improve health. Their job isn't to expand research or innovation. They're legally obligated to turn a profit for their shareholders. That is their job.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. And they're doing it.
So are you encouraged by the entrance of these companies or like California coming on and saying we're going to produce insulin?
I'm encouraged because it will be available to someone. So the amount of people that use an insulin pump is minimal compared to people that take injections, that take a generic insulin. So for the majority of people, especially underserved, underprivileged areas, this is huge. So what I have to do is I have to look at it and go, okay, a win for someone else, I still have to count it as a win for all of us, even if it doesn't affect me directly. So that's my view of it. Is it good? It's good for everybody, but it doesn't help people that, the small percentage that are on an insulin pump that are wearing a CGM. And I think, okay, I feel fairly privileged to have the technology that I have anyways right now. Yes, California is doing something amazing. Mark Cuban is doing something absolutely amazing by creating competition. That's really what they're doing. Do we need more insulin? No, it's in a warehouse right now from all the big 3. We don't need more insulin. We do need more competition and more pressure, which I believe is a good thing. I think.
Well, and I think that's true, again, of the entire pharmaceutical industry. Like, I think diabetes is often that insight that I was talking about, or that sort of way to see things more clearly, because it's a huge problem, but it's also a stable problem. Like we understand who has it. There's that statistic, like 95% of people who have diabetes don't know if they have it.
Right.
I think that's mainly type 2. But I think that just the stability of our understanding, like we've had insulin for over 100 years. Yeah, there's new innovations and there's new pumps, but I just think that there's a certain, like I said, like stability around diabetes and the community and the drugs and the understanding that allow you to see these bigger systems functioning around it more clearly.
Yes. Oh, I agree. Absolutely. That's why some of these companies that are definitely still making a profit, making insulin is one thing. To have Civica RX, a non-profit company, start making their own insulin, you just know the clock is ticking on some of these larger corporations. It's just a matter of time. But the real cash cow is not insulin, not for these manufacturers. It's in type 2 diabetes medicines.
Oh, I believe that.
It is in the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, the Mounjaros. That hits more of an audience, people that don't have diabetes that just need to lose weight. It is an added benefit of it. So really what is happening is the markups and the increases on insulin were really just a way to pay for the research to make type 2 diabetes medicines, which will be their main source of income over the years.
Well, right now they're trying to turn it into a pill. I just read that today. Like the headlines right now are like trying to make the Ozempics pill form instead of shots. And look, I'm not
against it.
We're in it. We're in it together. Less suffering, less. And I think all the stuff about Ozempic and how it quiets people's sort of internal chatter around food, or how it reduces other addictions. They find themselves like online shopping less. Like, whoa. Like, whoa.
Wild.
Whoa.
What is going on?
I wonder how you feel about, what I tell people now is diabetes, type 1, and I would assume type 2, is such an insight into not just the pharmaceutical industry, but our food industry. Like, my husband and I were talking about the other day, we were talking about the calories in a large Blizzard. Do you know how many calories?
I can't even imagine. It has to have at least 4 numbers, maybe 5.
Yeah, it's like 20. I think it's over 2,000, 1,800, somewhere like that. And it's over the daily allowance. And I said that should be illegal.
Right.
Like it really should. You should not be able to serve someone.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's poison. Like, and what I've told people, I'm like, if you could see what your blood sugar does on a soda, you'd never drink one again.
Right.
Like, we take our pancreases for granted.
Those things are hustling. Those pancreases.
Hustling.
Yeah, they are.
And you see, like with type 2 diabetes, and how common it is, how we're wearing them out, and it's not our individual failings. It is a system that I just think we know what this product does in our bodies. We know what it does to our blood sugar. We know what exposure, like elevated blood sugars over time, does, and we still it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
So I have 2 friends of mine. One of them, he has no affiliation with diabetes. He's a CrossFitter. He eats extremely clean, extremely healthy, works out more than any of us should. And another guy, his daughter has type 1. And they're both wearing a CGM right now. One of them for performance, one of them to see what his daughter goes through. And the ups and downs that they have is so shocking to them. They're like, Neil, I thought that this was going to be more of a flat line. I'm like, no, everything you eat affects you. Yours just doesn't go as high as mine does. I've got no way to bring it down on my own. You have these spikes and these valleys, but the things that we are eating are absolutely affecting us. Stress doesn't have as much of an effect as what we eat. The exercise, the other things that we do, they can all help. But at the end of the day, the one thing that we can really control is what we eat. But the problem is the products, the amount, the quantities that we are being given. It's a lot.
Well, and I tell people, not to brag, and if you don't even know what A1C is, it won't be exciting to you, but I have a 4.9 A1C. I'm very proud of my A1C.
Good for you. Yeah,
for
that's
41
amazing.
years old.
That's amazing.
And I tell people, I'm like, you know why? Because I just don't drink sugar. I love sugar.
Yeah.
I chew it. I don't drink it.
Yeah.
Like, if we can just get away from that,
Yep.
The brakes are, I think we would hear our pancreas sigh in relief across the country.
They're stressed
just
out.
Stop drinking it.
Yes. Yeah. Our pancreas is producing so much more than just insulin. It produces 6 other hormones. One that tells our stomach when it's full and when to empty. That pancreas is tired. It's doing too much.
Well, which makes sense that the weight loss drugs. If you're insulin resistant, then you're also not getting the message that you're full and for your stomach to empty.
It's all connected. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I just think, I've learned so much about, people think it's just sugar. So there's a lot. The first thing is, well, can you have sugar-free? No, because it's not about sugar. It's about carbs.
Right.
And sugar-free stuff often has a lot of carbs in it.
It really does.
And then the other thing I think that was like one of the most powerful things I learned was, it's not just carbs, it's a fat and protein rise. So if we eat something that's high in fat and protein, like a pizza, for example, then we get a rise like 2 hours later. And when a diabetes educator finally explained to me, like, well, look, that's a huge stress on your body. Those triglycerides and that inflammation from the high fat and the high protein eat into your basal, which is your like sort of foundation of insulin.
Right.
And so the bolus you gave for the food goes to make up for the basal, and then there's not enough bolus to last out the meal. And I was like, oh my God, so every time I'm eating like this, I'm stressing my body out. It takes so much more insulin, not because of the carbs, not because of the sugars, yes, because of that, but also because the fat and protein together is just so hard on my body. And I mean, I was like in my 40s, and I'm a pretty good, healthy eater,
smart.
And I had not ever heard it that way.
Right. So pizza is, for anybody who's living with type 1, it is the most difficult thing to gauge right. Most people never get it. It's like if you see somebody post about it on social media, it's because they did it well, and it's like capturing a unicorn.
It is.
Like, what in the world? It's the fat, the carbs, the proteins, and they all digest at different rates. It's it's a lot, man. It's a perfect storm.
And it's so brutal because it's such an easy food to eat.
Again,
like just order a pizza. That's what we did for our family. Like it's just let's just order a pizza. And now it's just diabetes has sucked all the joy out of pizza for us.
Food isn't fun anymore.
It's okay though. But it's like I always think about Michael Pollan, who said like you should eat that stuff if you make it yourself, because you won't make it yourself because it's a pain in the butt.
Right.
Like
it's
you
too
wouldn't
much.
eat donuts that much because you got to fry them, and that's a pain.
It's
you
so
wouldn't eat chicken wings
convenient
that often.
for us.
Yeah. Fries. If you didn't make fries from scratch, you'd never eat them. Are you kidding me?
You can have fries as much as you want as long as you make those.
Make
so
them
you're
yourself.
saying never is when I'm going to have those.
Yeah, if you have to make the pizza and the dough and the sauce and that, like, you never do it. Forget it.
And we don't have to. Now, this is also, so even what you said, internationally, people don't deal with some of this stuff over in the UK. The food quality in different countries is different. Now, I'm not saying that ours is the best or the worst, but it definitely, you've got a very Western American diet that we have, and it's not the same everywhere else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we went abroad last summer, we were in Italy, Switzerland, and France. We were on multiple daily injections, which is hard to get really good control on, especially with a kid, because they're talking about teeny tiny amounts. And we still had great numbers because we were moving all the time, and the food was not full of high fat and sugar.
Crazy.
We were eating snails. Listen, escargot is very diabetes friendly.
It's a lot of
as
protein.
is beef tartare, which are both things my 8-year-old ate. He he ordered it more than once. He loved beef tartare, which I was like, perfect, great.
Go for
all the beef tartare you want.
We can do the math on this.
We can do this. Well, what was the most surprising things you learned doing this series, and what do you wish everybody understood?
Most people, when they rant about insulin prices, blame the manufacturers. And that is the most telling thing, is that if I'm looking at it, for me, it's about 70% PBMs. The rest of it, the other 30%, is the manufacturers. That's the kind of the way that I weigh it out. I used to be furious. Like, I can't believe, honestly, I joke around like I want to drive over there and take care of things. It's not that easy. It's too insulated, and it's too massive. And then it's not super encouraging, but a lot of the things in our federal government are not set up for success in this. It just isn't going to happen quickly. It is going to take years.
You got some real industry capture when it comes to this industry.
Oh my gosh, yes. 2019 is when the Senate subcommittee hearings happened. We're at 2023, and we just saw at the beginning of this year is when Medicaid is now allowed to go out and negotiate. That's so long, but there's just so much money involved in it.
Is there any movement to regulate PBMs?
No, none.
Maybe that's where we should start. Maybe we should all write our congressional representatives and say.
So I don't know if this is going to shock you or not. I wrote every single one of my state representatives. Everyone, not even in my district, not in my area. I wrote all of them. Do you know how many contacted me back?
How many?
1.
0. 1.
I got 1. I'm not in his district. So I couldn't help.
Man. Well, we're going to depend on you. If there are some bills that you think look promising, you got to tell us here at Pantsuit Politics, and we'll all write our representatives.
Yeah, there are definitely some. And, JDRF does a really good job. ADA does a really good job of advocating at the federal level. They have, Congress, they have times when a lot of people living with type 1 go in different, elementary age, high school age, college age, and adults go in there and they advocate on behalf of. I think those are very important to keep it in front of people. There is plenty of advocacy groups that are out there right now trying to take this head on. It's just it's a lot. It really is.
Well, an essential part of advocacy is education. So thank you for all the work you do on the BDs. Really appreciate it here at Pantsuit Politics.
I loved every second of it. Thanks.
And thanks for coming on our show.
This is, like I said, dream come true right here. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacey Simms, welcome to Pantsuit Politics.
Sarah, it is amazing to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
So my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes back in 2006 when he was 23 months old, which is a circus unto itself, a toddler with type 1. But he's 18, super independent. You tell these kids they can do anything, and the unfortunate part is they believe you, and then they want to leave home and do all this stuff.
So true.
He's doing great. But I'm the host of Diabetes Connections, which is a long-running podcast for people who use insulin, people with type 1 and other types of diabetes who use insulin. And I am also the host of Mom's Night Out events and the author of The World's Worst Diabetes Mom books.
Great title. Now, just so we know, the people here are thinking, wow, she's an amazing voice for podcasting. This was a really interesting alignment of events in her life. What did you do before your son was diagnosed with diabetes?
Yeah, I was a TV reporter and a radio show host for a long time. But, when your kids hit middle school, that getting up at 3 a.m. thing is really, really rough. So we made a big switch. And I have a daughter as well, who's a couple years older than my son. And boy, it's been great. So yeah, thanks. Voice for podcasting.
Yeah, she really does. It's such a beautiful voice. I've never been a TV news reporter, but I feel confident this is a better gig.
You know what? You need less lipstick. I don't rip my hair. I love that part.
I love it. Now, I invited you on because, as the people just heard with my conversation with Neil Greathouse, I think diabetes is such an interesting insight into the way the community functions, the way the disease functions, how you kind of handle the disease, just even what is happening in your body is such an interesting insight and metaphor for so many other things in American life. And I was so interested to talk to you because when we talk about being in the diabetes community, especially parenting type 1 kids, all these things we say about bipartisanship and civic dialogue are true, which is it helps to have a common goal. Right? It has to have something that unites you that you're working toward. Obviously true if you're talking about parents of type 1 diabetic children, for sure. And also, what I say all the time on Pantsuit Politics is, the thing that unites us is we all want better for our kids, right? No matter how far apart your politics are, we should all want better for our kids. And yet, even before I reached out to you, I felt pretty confident saying that is not enough. And I bet politics bubbles up inside this community in really interesting ways, despite all these uniting factors.
Oh, without a doubt, when we were talking offline about this issue, it really made me think, diabetes unites a very large group of diverse people, right?
Yes.
I'm sure since your son was diagnosed, you've crossed paths with people perhaps you would never have met. It does not discriminate in terms of income level or any kind of racial or ethnic, we can get into in terms of the actual discrimination that then happens. But diabetes itself, right? It's everywhere. And you're not issued a new political affiliation at your kid's hospital stay, right? You don't leave with a CGM and a stamp on a new voter card. You come in with your belief system and everything you think, and you leave perhaps looking at different issues, but you may not look at them in a different way. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of people, perhaps in politics outside of diabetes, right, think that there's a monolithic voting bloc now. All parents of kids with type 1 feel this way. All adults with type 1 feel this way. And they don't. I run a very large group in the Charlotte, North Carolina area where I live for parents of kids with type 1. It's a Facebook group, but we try to get together. And I had to put a rule in 2020, about politics and politicking. I had to be very specific in what I was talking about. And that was the first time, even though we'd had issues in the past.
I'm surprised you made it through 2016.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to remember now, but 2016 was different. In terms of, at least for my groups, in terms of the social media, the way social media pushed things out, that, the enragement, engagement kind of thing, it was there, but not in the same way that the last 5 years, I'd say, have really shown up.
No, it definitely pumped it up. Well, and I just think it's so interesting to watch because diabetes doesn't discriminate and sort of public policy around diabetes doesn't discriminate, right? At one point, you might have a politician who you loathe in every other situation who is doing something and you're like, well, dang it, I might have to say something nice about them. Or you might have a politician who you usually support who is not supporting a policy you knew would make a huge difference in the type 1 diabetes community.
It happens all the time. It happened a couple of days ago, right? Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill expanding eligibility for CGM for all people in Florida who are on Medicaid with diabetes who use insulin. And, the vast majority of people who may not support him in the diabetes community look at that and say, great, thank you. That's a good thing. And CGM, continuous glucose monitor, is a way to measure, a little technical, interstitial fluid, the fluid under your skin. So you don't have to poke your finger. You just put the CGM in your arm. It's a game changer.
Technology.
It is absolutely incredible. And there's a school of thought, I subscribe to it, that if you're using insulin, you should have access to a CGM. So that's a great thing. And you do see posts and people say like, oh, I hate him, but he did this good thing. But there are people who somehow kind of twist themselves into knots to find a way that says, well, he didn't really, or there's other things. It's amazing how, that happens on both sides, right? On all sides, where we cannot divorce ourselves from our political jersey to say, even with something that is a meaningful change to our family, that, I still hate that guy.
Yeah. And that's what's so, I think, unfortunate is we have really accelerated, or I don't know if we ever were making like cool-headed policy assessments when it came to our politics. Probably not. But it just feels like we really leaned in the last few years where it's like, I don't care. Like, you can't do anything right. You are irredeemable as a politician to me. And I really do think diabetes and like being a part of this community, and this can happen with lots of sort of identity driven experiences. It can feel that. It can feel this sense of like, you've crossed me on this thing that is so inherent to who I am. I cannot look at anything else. And I think that's fair. I just think diabetes, and because it is a health condition and because the healthcare industry, those policies matter in like a day-to-day impactful way that is difficult to ignore. I think that just plays out a little differently.
It does. And it's interesting too, because, our healthcare system is so complex and it's so hard to navigate with or without diabetes, that the complexity lends itself to misinformation, to kind of, I don't want to say burying the truth, but, it's so hard to get at what really happened. I mean, you look at the price of insulin and how convoluted and complicated, and the PBMs and everything else. Whoever you want to support or whoever you want to hate, you can make a case for it because of those complexities. This person didn't go far enough. This person went too far. That's not a cap. That's a copay cap. That's not a legislative action. That's encouragement. And, as you and I are talking, there is a cap for people on Medicare for insulin prices, but the lowering of the price that we saw from all the three big insulin makers, that's voluntary. They could reverse that at any time.
Yeah.
So it's easy to with that complexity. That's what, my local group, when I talk to moms a lot, we're just trying to parse out what the heck happened. Like, who should we support?
Right. Just getting through the intricacies of the policy itself. And that's why the community support is important, and also confusing. If you have 6 people saying 6 different things about how we should feel around this policy, that tells you how complex it is right there.
Yeah.
Well, I also, as we're talking, realize your work in particular intersects with the complexities of politics and our partisan identities. It also, obviously, the title of your book, The Worst Diabetes Mom, like, it intersects with parenting, which is another place, I think, where we tell ourselves one thing and then the complex realities of being a parent or our children's existence come into play. When you wrote that book and you titled it that, what were you trying to help people understand? Like, what did diabetes teach you about parenting?
Boy,
it probably continues to teach you.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, my kids are 18 and 21, and there is no finish line in parenting. I don't know what I was thinking, but I kind of thought, like, there's no medal. You're not running across that ribbon. But I kind of thought at some point I would be done, which sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. Because I'm helping parent my kids in different ways now, right? Especially my son with diabetes is very independent, but I'm still helping him in new ways. And the book was kind of an answer to a shift I'd felt in the community. I started in diabetes in 2006, which predates the iPhone, which sounds like ancient history now, but it really predates social media. It predates continuous glucose monitoring. And while I really am so thankful for all of the technology, my son uses an automated insulin delivery system with a pump and a CGM that talk to each other like your son does. It's just amazing. And I never want to give that stuff back. But when you can see all the information, and that's what happens with these systems, every 5 minutes or every minute with some systems, as a parent, your impulse is, I'm going to get this right. I'm going to do right by my kid. I'm going to do the best I can. And it's impossible. It is impossible to be perfect as a parent with or without diabetes. Why would we think it would be possible? So the book was a direct response to a free-flowing conversation I was having on the internet, like somebody in Facebook saying, like, I think we were talking about overnight blood sugar checks before CGM. And I was not doing the same thing that this other parent was doing. And they were furious at me. And they really did call me, the horrible names and everything else. And I said, well, I must be the world's worst diabetes mom. And that's when I just walked away from the conversation. But I thought, you know what? If I'm the worst, my kid's doing great.
Yeah.
He's doing fine. Maybe I should share that story. And as I did, and I shared all of our mistakes, because I don't know about you, but we make mistakes every week, every day with diabetes. And those mistakes are how I learned. And those mistakes made us laugh. They made us stronger. And so those are what the books are all about.
Well, that makes me cry because I've had a terrible diabetes morning. So it feels good to hear somebody say that, even though I know that, even though I've read your book. It just, again, proves my point. Diabetes is an excellent metaphor, because that's not the only place that transformation in parenting was happening, where all of a sudden we were getting flooded with advice and expectations and advice when it came to parenting. But it's like, if you think you're stressed and burned out from the standard around like sort of normal everyday parenting, add on the possibility that your child could die. Like, just take that, dial it all the way up to 11, because you do get in this space where you're like, I think about all the time the fact that my favorite movie of all time is Still Magnolias, and that it defines so many of my ideas about parenting, and that now here I am, stupid Malin, parenting a child with diabetes. Now, I mean, and look, I think that movie did a real public service, not just about organ donation, but also just like, I can tell people, that scene in Still Magnolias, that's what it is. That's what it's like. He could get a little wobbly, like, just like telling people, like, that's what a low looks like. It is dangerous. They need sugar. It's an easy fix. Like, but also it's just like, shoo, that's like the water I was swimming in. And then my dang kid got diagnosed with diabetes. And it's so intense, because I mean, again, you tell yourself in regular parenting, just psychologically, if I do this, I'll screw them up. I'll do this, I'll screw them up. Like, it's just, the pressure is so high.
Yeah, and I love Steel Magnolias.
Who
I know it's
doesn't?
not popular in the diabetes community. Well, a lot of people don't like it because a lot of people were blindsided by it. When you think about, I have a friend who saw it as a young adult or a teenager, and they didn't. She had lived with diabetes, and her mom was like, "Let's watch this." Back in the day, no idea. So it's really, I know. But when you watch that movie again, if you do, Sarah, watch the young woman with diabetes has no community. There is nobody else around her with type 1. There's no camp, right? There's no friend. There's nobody to help her navigate that world. And I think while we've had lots of amazing breakthroughs with diabetes, and I'm going to sound really hokey now, but there really is no substitute for that community.
So true.
And I think her life would have been so much different. And it's based on a real story.
Yeah, it's a true
would
story.
have been
The
so
brother
much
wrote
different.
the screenplay.
Yeah,
You also never see her actually treat her diabetes. Like you never see a shot.
That's probably for the best. Movies and TV are so bad at that. I'm just like kind of thankful, right? They're not saying like, I'm low, I need insulin. Oh my God. No. It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
But you also mentioned parenting pressure. The one example I like to give is you can feel bad about how you pack your kids' lunch. You could have the most nutritious food in the world without diabetes, but you can look online and see these amazing bento boxes and little notes and fancy cutouts. And, I'm slapping together a sandwich, a yogurt, a carrot, and Cheetos or whatever, right? I'm throwing lunch together every day when they were little. And when you add diabetes pressure on top of that, it's not so much the outcomes because these kids are healthy, knock on wood, the technology and the knowledge, if you have access and education, it's so much easier in some ways. The mental load is still there. But I'm thinking about just the pressure on the parent to think about, am I doing this lunch right? Yes, you are, but you feel it every day. You feel like you're failing them when you give them the stupid lunchbox.
Yeah. I mean, the internet is there to flood you with information about how you could be doing it better. Really on everything, but particularly
on everything.
Parenting.
Yeah. But when you get that feedback, when you get numbers in your face every 5 minutes, it codifies that feedback in a way that I think it makes us have to stop and say, I can never be perfect at this. I'm going to be safe and happy. My kid's going to be safe and happy. And that is enough. And you have to repeat it because 16 years in, I really do feel like the worst. I really wonder sometimes, did I give him too much independence? Is he going to be? He went to Israel when he was 16 for a month with a camp program, like a non-diabetes camp program, and managed great. But do I still worry? Of course. You never stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think it's so hard because that feeling of, am I doing it right? Am I failing? I use some of the tools I used before diabetes, which is that history. Like I think, listen, Sonia Sotomayor sits on the Supreme Court and they were like boiling her freaking needles to use them again. They didn't know what she could have been sitting at 500 every night for hours for most of her childhood. That's just the reality. Like we wouldn't have known. So who knows? And look at all these long-lived type 1 diabetics without any of this technology. And I have to remind myself of that constantly, which is a thing I use in other parenting. Like I'm not trying hard enough, but also I'm doing a hell of a lot better than past generations.
And that's really all you can do. I mean, and some of those folks will tell you they feel like technology puts an added burden on the parents. Now, you can't help it, right? You do want better outcomes, so you want to use that and you want to find ways to be great with your kids. But I love talking to adults with type 1 because they will set you straight.
They will. They'll be like, I was at 300 yesterday. Calm down. I'm like, okay, thank you. I feel better now. Well, and to circle back to the political point we started with, it's the same thing. There's too much pressure. We think we can perfect it. That's, I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive. This is not a secret. And I think what I see the most when I talk to my super progressive oldest child is this sense that there is a destination we can get to. If they just give us the reins and get out of our way, we'd get there and everything would be perfect. And it's not true. And it's also torturous. It is, I can see the way I felt like that for most of my 20s. And I was mad all the time. I was just mad all the time. Mad at them, mad at the country, mad, because I thought perfection was achievable in politics if the people on the other side would just get out of my way. And I do think situations when we acknowledge their complexity, and that's what I think what happens when you have a family member with diabetes, you cannot avoid the complexities anymore. You cannot create a narrative based on your own experiences and emotions. It's not that those go mute, but there's just this very concrete sort of data entry point that doesn't go away.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand too that, and I'll be transparent, I'm a registered independent. I always have been. Part of that has to do with journalism, but I think it's really important to understand that every policy, as you well know, impacts people in slightly different ways. And I think in the diabetes community, if we stop listening, I've seen people who do not believe that some people were impacted a certain way by Obamacare. Obamacare helped so many people with diabetes because it lifted people up into insurance where they couldn't get insurance before, right? Pre-existing conditions.
Oh my God. I don't even know when I think back of like when we had pre-existing conditions and type 1 diabetes, like I can't.
But it hurt some people who now wound up paying for more because of the way their insurance plan was restructured. And I've seen some of those voices not be listened to, feel like they weren't valid. And I feel like you can't check politics at the door. I mean, let's not be completely naive. But in the community like this, we have to listen to each other and we have to help each other. I mean, I'll tell you, and I might get in trouble for making this public, but one of the things that I do in my local group is, we help each other out with supplies. It's not just insulin. If things cost more, and they do on different insurance plans, right? High deductible, blah, 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 marketplace, I don't even know. I used to joke, I get in my minivan and here we are in the gray market and we're trading supplies and we're going places and we're helping people. I don't care what your political affiliation is in that point. We need each other. Yeah. And I feel like it's a little kumbaya, and I apologize for that. But, the diabetes community has taught me that listening to other people and understanding that politics can be different. If I don't help this person now, right, that's when they need the help, is now. The help may not be there from the government or from their doctor or from their clinic. So it's a real lesson in immediacy and listening to other people. And I don't drive a minivan anymore, but I'm still willing to get in my car.
Well, and here's the thing too, back to this horse I just keep beating into the ground. Like, I think diabetes makes something explicit that is true, but that is hard to acknowledge outside of a chronic condition like this, which is that everyone's dealing with hardship.
Oh my gosh.
Hardship just, there are different levels of hardship. And I think diabetes just makes it so black and white, and really makes like concrete and all these things we're talking about, the complexity, the hardships that people face in their everyday life, the reality that like no one has a monopoly on being right, that you can't reach perfect, that you can't control everything, like all these things that we say we know, we say we believe, but then something like this comes along and is like, okay, we're about to put the rubber to the road on whether you believe all this. Like, I'll never forget one time I was listening to Shauna Nyquist on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. And she was like, God doesn't love us less if we stumble. And I was like, I was just nodding along. I was like, amen, Shauna, you tell him. And then she was like, and he doesn't love us more if we get it all right. And I was like, wait, what? Wait, don't say that out loud. Don't do that, Shauna. That's not cool. You could have kept that part quiet. Oh, that's the part I really believe deep down that I didn't need somebody to call me to the mat on. But diabetes will call you to the mat on that.
It'll do it every day, if not on an hourly basis. You hear those Dexcom alarms and you're like, what?
What did I do? Why do you hate me? Well, and it's just, when Felix was first diagnosed, I formulated this theory, or put words to something that I think I'd had a theory on for a long time. I had a friend from high school who is a kind man, but he was like, what'd you do? Give him so much sugar? And I was like, bless. And I wasn't mad at him because I know that he is not a hateful person. But I told Nicholas, I was like, the next person who says that to me, and nobody has, full disclosure, I said, the next person that says to me, I'm going to just say, nope, it's a chaos lottery. You could be next. Like, it's just a chaos lottery, man. Like, it's just what we're dealing with. And diabetes will show you that, especially type 1.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The chaos lottery.
The chaos lottery, man.
I feel like we've been in that for years. Yeah. No, it really is. It really, an autoimmune disease, anybody can get it. And, I heard that quite a bit because my son was not yet 2 when he was diagnosed. So people could not puzzle how a child that tiny could have any type of diabetes. So we heard that a lot. And, it took me a long time. It's funny to not just be defensive and say like, that's type 2, he didn't do it. Because type 2 now we know is so much more complex than that too, right? No diabetes is caused by eating too much sugar. I'll get a little soapboxy, like no one with any kind of diabetes wants or deserves it.
No.
So how you handle those questions when you're in the thick of the chaos at the beginning is a little different, I think, than how you handle them down the road. But yeah, I heard, we could have an offline conversation about all the stuff I've heard with a 2-year-old.
But you know what's underneath that? Here's what's underneath when people were saying that to you because your child was so young. It's because we think you do something to deserve it. And that means I can avoid it.
I can avoid it.
You have to confront that when it's a little tiny baby.
Yes.
That doesn't compute. And then people are like, but I thought kind of deep down you did something to deserve it. And that means I can
too many
avoid
fruit
it.
snacks.
But he's under 2. And so he didn't do anything because he's a baby. Oh no, what does this mean? Like it's like you can see the sort of circuitry misfiring.
Yeah. What can I do to avoid being you?
Yes.
It's just like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, it's a chaos lottery. You can't, baby. Sorry. Well, and that's the other thing that's like, again, it's a perfect sort of illustration for what we face otherwise, which is you also get I could never handle it, which I also find very upsetting. Like, I don't want to hear how amazing we are. I'm really not interested in that. I can't even explain to you why. That should be something like you want to hear. Oh my God, you're such amazing parents.
I'll tell you, I think why I don't like hearing it is because I don't want you to tell me that I'm amazing. I want you to figure out how to help me. Yes. I want more training in daycare. I want more training in schools. I want more help. I want more access. I want better stuff. By telling me I'm amazing, it says, well, you've got this.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah.
And I resent that. I'm okay if my friend tells me I'm amazing. Well, yes, I am. But if the general public, and that's what we tell all special needs moms, and that's what we tell a lot of other, and we are special needs moms, even though diabetes is, not very visible in many ways. I feel like that's almost a way to kind of get around all of the better access and education that really is needed and can certainly happen with diabetes.
It's so true. It's so true. Yes, I think you're exactly right. Like it does feel like, but you're on your own because we could never. So you better do it all by yourself.
Right. And look how good you're doing.
Yes. Yes. Well, and we had a little bit of experience because Felix had another disability. Like he has hemiplegia. And so I was already sort of used to that undercurrent. Diabetes and hemiplegia are very, very, very different. There's no like sort of day-to-day management with hemiplegia in the way that there is with diabetes. But we did have, I think, the sort of only leg up, which was we didn't want to treat him as if he's a problem to be fixed. Right. Like that was really important.
Oh, sure.
Us, and I think that's a valuable lesson and experience. I take that into my other kids because they don't have an outwardly expressed physical disability, but they are different. I'm going to cry.
Yeah. No,
and
it does.
I always think about that Temple Grandin movie where her mother over and over again looked at her and said, different, not less. Different, not less. And I think that, the diabetes community and, the entire disability community has so much to teach all of us about that.
Yeah. And just the fact that you acknowledge that your other kids are also different, but not less. It's so important. This whole family aspect of diabetes, right? I have another child and there's, there are so many issues because you have to give diabetes so much attention. You have no choice. Yeah. And the fact that you're already involving your son's siblings in this is so important. It is not a problem to be fixed. It is a situation that you deal with. Yep. You do your best, you move on. Sometimes it does stop you. It slows you down. It stinks. But then you go on and you figure it out. My son, I'm going to cry. My son recently thanked me for not letting diabetes, hold him back from the crazy stuff he wanted to do. And he does some crazy stuff. And I kept thinking like, wow, I felt like it really did stop you. Like it really slowed you down. You had to do a lot of stuff to get where you went. But I can't say he didn't care as long as he got to do it, because of course he cared. It was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But he figured out a way to do it. And I don't know, we all talk about teenagers and how much they stink and everything. And it is rough. But man, when they come back around, sometimes they're like, wow, this is a human being who said thank you. Amazing.
Yeah. I always tell my 14-year-old when he starts to get revved up, I'm like, can we just skip to the part in about 20 minutes where you apologize for being a jerk? Can we just skip right to that part? That'd be great. I'd like to go right ahead to that point if you don't mind. Yeah, I just think that again, it's clarifying. It's a situation that clarifies what's worth doing.
Yeah.
It's a crappy way to be clarified, but it does work. It's just like every difficult thing. Everything doesn't happen for a purpose, but you can learn from everything. You can
Absolutely.
integrate the difficult things that happen to you in your life. That's very sweet. I did get a shout out that he missed me at diabetes camp. I have not gotten a thank you, but he's only 8. However, Stacey, and this is fun because the next segment is going to be me talking to Felix about Camp Sweeney. My husband said, Felix, did you miss me? And ice cold, this child responded, Dad, I don't think I said the word dad once while I was there.
Whoa.
Can you even?
Yes. That's a sign of a good camp.
That's what everyone says. They're like, he's not right. He means and it's true. I mean, he had a blast. He didn't want to leave. But I was like, Felix, that is ice cold.
That's an 8-year-old's honesty, though.
That's exactly right.
Diabetes camp. I'm so glad you're talking to him. I did a couple episodes with my son talking about diabetes camp, and it's really fun, and definitely preserve it because diabetes camp at 8 will be very different. Like do it every year.
Oh yeah.
Even if you don't air it, but do it every year.
Because Camp Sweeney, like there are a lot of teenagers there. His like camp mom, that was her senior year. And she was like, she'd been for 11 years in a row.
Yeah. My son went for 8 years, I think, to his sleepaway diabetes camp. And now he goes to a regular sleepaway camp where he's working. He's working this summer. He's a lifeguard. So he's gone for 8 weeks. He's totally self-managed.
Totally self-managed. Put it in my veins. I need you to I'm going to record you saying that. And I'm obviously recording you saying that, but I'm going to make that my ringtone. Totally.
Well, the next part of the sentence is, though, I still worry. So you have to record that too. But I let him go.
Hey, my grandmother's in her 80s and she tells me she worries about her kids all the time. So,
no.
And none of them have diabetes, so it doesn't matter.
You never stop. That's what we started this by me talking about there's no finish line to parenting. So the bad news is you never stop worrying. But hopefully the good news is you also never stop teaching your kids, learning from them, enjoying them. And, the worry is balanced out by all that good stuff. But I do say half the time, like, why did we have them? All we do is worry.
That's so true. What were we thinking? Well, I don't think that you're the world's worst diabetes mom. Just for the record.
Thank you.
Just want to put that on the record here at Pains of Politics. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
It was wonderful. Thanks so much for talking with me.
For Outside Politics today, I'm joined by a very special guest, a guest who just informed me he is VIP. Introduce yourself, VIP guest.
Hi, I'm Felix Holland.
Felix Holland, how old are you?
8.
I invited you here to talk about Camp Sweeney, where you just spent most of June. Tell us, what is Camp Sweeney?
It's a diabetic camp.
And where? The great state
Gainesville, Texas.
Texas, the great state of Texas. What'd you think about Texas?
It was hot.
It was hot. You learned about Whataburger, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is diabetes camp? What does that mean? In what ways is diabetes camp the same as regular summer camp, and in what ways is it different?
The same is like you have activities, and it's different because they're almost all diabetics.
There are some people that aren't diabetics.
Yeah.
Tell us, what do you call those?
Nonnies.
Nonnies. Some people bring friends that don't have diabetes, and they're called nonnies. And so when every kid at camp has diabetes, what does that change? I would think meal times are kind of different, right?
Yeah.
How is mealtime different?
Because we all have to get into a thing they call the flight pattern, there was this very specific spot you had to sit and to prick your finger, and they gave it insulin.
Yeah, because they know exactly what carbs are in your meal for you because you picked out what you wanted beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So you learn a lot about diabetes. That's one of the code of living. Tell me what the code of living is.
It's honesty, humility, pursuit of diabetic control, respectfulness. Can't name all.
And you get to be in the code of living if you achieve those things, right?
Yeah, you get to be a code of living representative.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. So what does pursuit of diabetic control mean?
It means keeping in range, but also not feeling left outside of camp for your diabetes too, kind of.
I like that. Tell me more about that.
It's
Do you feel left out sometimes because of your diabetes?
No.
No? That's good. But so I think it means integrating diabetes as a part of who you are, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. Did you feel like you learned a lot about that at Camp Sweeney?
Yeah.
What was it like to be around kids that know exactly what it's like?
It was just nice.
Nice and normal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about Camp Sweeney is just like summer camp? Like, what were your favorite summer camp activities you did at Camp Sweeney?
Like boating and canoeing and fishing and stuff.
And what was your favorite activity? Which I got to tell you, this is not very common for summer camp.
Broadcasting.
Broadcasting, making your mama, the podcaster, proud. Tell us about broadcasting.
It was like this thing where it was like a live thing, and there were 3 seats for the host.
Mm-hmm.
It was like we had segments and stuff, and it was like normal broadcasting.
But it's like a radio show. You played songs. What was the first song you played?
I think it was Even Flow.
Even Flow by Pearl Jam. Daddy and I could listen on an app, and we knew immediately who picked that song. So you could just select songs to play, and then you have segments where you talk about what it's like at Camp Sweeney.
Yeah.
And I got a special shout out, which was very fun, because you didn't write me back. Why did you never write me back?
Because I was having too much fun. I was having FU into the MAX.
FU into the MAX. So you were there for 18 days. That's a long time to be away from home at 8 years old. Did you get homesick at all?
No.
No? Not even 1 millisecond were you like, man, I miss home?
Yes.
Okay.
But it wasn't about you. It was about Amos.
What did you miss about Amos?
It was just that note. I was like laughing, crying.
And you missed Amos because you laugh and cry with Amos a lot?
Yeah.
That makes me happy. Do you want to go back next year?
Yes.
So you want to go back. You really loved it. You really loved Camp Sweeney. What would you say to a kid your age who might be afraid to go to diabetes camp, who's nervous? What would you tell them to encourage them to go?
It doesn't make you feel like you're like the only one in the whole world. You're like in a cabin with a bunch of diabetics.
How does it make you feel?
Good.
Good? And
Yeah.
included?
Mm-hmm.
Understood?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm really, really, really happy you had that experience and that you had so much fun at Camp Sweeney.
Okay.
Even though me and your dad really missed you.
Yeah. You wrote a whole song.
I did. I wrote a whole song to the tune of Hello Mudda, Hello
Yes.
Fada.
I remember.
Write me back, oh Felix Holland, write me back.
Yeah, that one.
Thank you for coming on Pantsuit Politics and telling us about diabetes camp and Camp Sweeney.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for all of you for listening to this very special diabetes-focused episode of Pantsuit Politics. We will be back in your ears next Tuesday together, back from summer break officially. Beth and I, back on the regular schedule. It's going to be great. We can't wait to get back in the swing of things with all of you. Until then, keep it nuanced, y'all.
Pantsuit Politics is produced by Studio D Podcast Production. Elise Knapp is our managing director.
Maggie Penton is our community engagement manager. Dante Lima is the composer and performer of our theme music.
Our show is listener-supported. Special thanks to our executive producers.
Martha Brunitsky,
Allie Edwards,
Janice Elliott,
Sarah Greenup,
Julie Haller,
Helen Handley,
Tiffany Hassler,
Emily Holiday,
Katie Johnson,
Katina Zuganellis-Kasling,
Barry Kaufman,
Molly Kors,
Catherine Vollmer,
Lori Ladow,
Lily McClure,
Linda Daniel,
Emily Neasley,
The Hutchins,
Tawny Peterson,
Tracy Putoff,
Sarah Ralph,
Jeremy Sequoia,
Katie Steigers,
Karen True,
Annika Uvaline,
Nick and Elisa Valelli,
Amy Whited,
Emily Helen Olson,
Lee Shea McDonough,
Morgan McHugh,
Danny Osmond,
Jen Ross,
Sabrina Drago,
Jeff Davis, Melinda Johnston, Michelle Wood, Joshua Allen, Nicole Berkless, Paula Bremer, and Tim Miller.
Until then, you want to say it with me. Until then, say keep it nuanced, y'all. Ready? Until then.
Until then.
No, I'll say until then. Then you say keep it nuanced. Are you ready? Until then,
what
keep it nuanced, y'all. Ready? Ready? We'll say it together. Until then, keep it nuanced, y'all. Very good.
VIP out.